The sea was calm at dawn, its surface shimmering like glass, yet the silence it carried was unnatural, oppressive. On the pier, a wetsuit and oxygen tank lay abandoned, dripping with salt water, as if their owner had vanished mid-breath. A fisherman noticed first, his cigarette falling into the tide as his eyes fixed on the sight, horror dawning. "Where's the diver?" he whispered, his voice cracked with disbelief. Radios crackled from a nearby boat, voices sharp and urgent. "No contact." Diver unresponsive. Panic spread quickly. The tide carried only silence back, no bubbles, no movement. What had begun as an ordinary dive now reeked of something darker, something deliberate. The air thickened with the weight of realization. A person was gone, swallowed whole by the water, leaving nothing but questions in their wake. The case had begun, and beneath the surface, secrets waited to be dragged into the light. Police tape cordoned the pier as officers pressed onlookers back, the crowd buzzing with whispers. Detective Laura Hayes arrived, her trench coat darkened by the sea mist, her expression set like stone. She crouched near the discarded gear, fingers tracing the scratched tank. "This wasn't left by accident," she muttered, her tone grim. The fisherman stammered, "I saw nothing, just turned, and it was there." Laura's eyes narrowed. The silence around the pier screamed louder than words. The missing diver wasn't just lost. Something had gone wrong, deeply wrong. News spread like wildfire. By noon, reporters swarmed the dock, their cameras flashing against the gray sky. Laura stepped into the spotlight reluctantly, her voice steady. "A diver has gone missing under unusual circumstances. We are treating this as suspicious." Gasps echoed. Behind her, the missing diver's mother clutched a photo, tears streaking her face. "Find my son," she pleaded, her words cutting through the noise. Laura's jaw tightened. The case had shifted from a mystery to a demand for justice. The dive site was scoured. Police divers slipped into the dark water, their beams slicing through the gloom. Laura stood on the boat deck, arms folded, eyes locked on the rippling surface. Hours passed. Finally a diver surfaced, shaking his head. No body. Nothing. Laura's stomach sank. Equipment missing. Body gone. No sign of struggle. It felt orchestrated. "Somebody wanted this man erased," she whispered. The sea was no longer a witness. It was an accomplice. Night fell over the harbor, the pier now deserted, lit only by flickering street lamps. Laura reviewed her notes, each detail scratching deeper at her mind. The diver had vanished without a trace. No accident, no mistake. Somewhere out there, someone knew the truth. She closed her notebook, exhaling sharply. If he's gone, someone sent him there. The sea whispered against the rocks, and in its rhythm, Laura felt both a warning and a promise. The case was only beginning, and the water still held its secrets. Detective Laura Hayes sat across from Margaret Cole, the diver's mother, inside her modest living room, its walls lined with framed family photos. Margaret's hands trembled as she clutched a worn picture of her son in scuba gear, smiling at a beach years ago. "He loved the water," she whispered, voice raw. "But it frightened me. I told him the ocean takes more than it gives." Laura leaned forward, steady and calm. "When did you last hear from him?" Margaret blinked back tears. 2 nights ago. He said he'd found something important, but he didn't explain." The words hung heavy, more confession than memory. Laura wrote it down, but her instincts sharpened. This was no ordinary dive. Margaret's voice cracked. "Please find him. I can't lose the only piece of my husband I have left." The house felt suffocating with grief, and Laura carried its weight out the door. Laura met with Daniel Reed, the diver's closest friend and frequent dive partner, at the marina. Daniel, mid-30s, sun-worn and restless, leaned against a weathered boat rail, eyes darting nervously. "He wasn't supposed to dive alone," he muttered, voice tight with guilt. Laura studied him. "Then why was his gear left behind?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "He said he'd found something offshore. He wouldn't tell me what." He kicked at the deck, frustration boiling. "I should have stopped him." Laura's gaze narrowed, noting the defensive tone. "Did he seem afraid?" Daniel hesitated. Not afraid. Determined. Like he knew someone didn't want him looking. The words struck hard, painting a picture of danger beneath calm waves. The marina air stank of salt and gasoline, but Laura sensed another stench rising, the smell of secrets rotting just out of reach. The missing diver's apartment told its own story. Laura entered carefully, eyes sweeping over scattered dive journals, maps, and photos tacked to the walls. A half-packed duffel sat by the bed, clothes folded with precision, but unfinished. She picked up a notebook, its final entry scribbled. Proof lies beneath. They can't hide it forever. Her pulse quickened. Proof of what? She murmured. The refrigerator door rattled in the draft, startling her, and for a moment, the silence pressed close, like the diver's absence filled the room. She noticed a cracked photo frame on the dresser. The diver with Daniel, smiling in wetsuits, their friendship once unshakable. Laura closed her notebook, eyes narrowing. This wasn't a man running. This was a man preparing to confront something dangerous, and someone wanted him stopped. Laura visited the dive shop where the missing man rented equipment. The owner, Thomas Hale, late 40s, broad-shouldered, wiped his hands nervously on a rag as she questioned him. He asked for extra oxygen tanks, Hale admitted, eyes shifting away. Laura pressed. Why would he need them? Hale shrugged. Said the job would take longer than usual. Didn't say what job. Laura studied his face, noting the cracks in his confidence. A shadow crossed his eyes when she mentioned Daniel's name. Those two were thick as thieves, Hale muttered, but lately, something drove a wedge between them. He dropped the rag, hands trembling slightly. Laura leaned closer. If you're hiding something, now's the time. Hale's silence told her more than words could. The dive shop smelled of brine and rubber, but the air was thick with fear. That night, Laura stood on the pier, the sea stretching out in endless black, its surface glistening under fractured moonlight. She replayed the diver's last words to his mother, the cryptic journal entry, and Daniel's hesitant confession. Proof lies beneath, she whispered to herself, eyes fixed on the water. Waves slapped the pier's wooden posts with steady rhythm, like a clock ticking down. Every clue pointed toward a secret buried under the sea, guarded by fear, betrayal, or worse. Laura clenched her notebook tight, the cold wind stinging her face. If he's down there, she said under her breath, then so is the truth. The ocean gave no answer, only a hollow roar, but in that silence, Laura felt the presence of something watching, waiting for her next move. Detective Laura Hayes stood on the breakwater at first light, wind needling through her coat as gulls carved circles over gray water. She replayed Daniel's words and the diver's final note until they felt like coordinates. A harbor worker waved her over, eyes skittish. You should see this, he said, leading her beneath the pier. A coil of cut anchor line lay hidden among kelp, its frayed end blackened as if burned. Laura crouched close, pulse ticking faster. Sabotage, she murmured, and the word tasted like rust. The worker swallowed. I heard a boat leave late last night. No lights, no chatter. Laura marked the detail and scanned the moorings. The marina looked ordinary, but secrets moved there like tides. She called the lab, voice hardening. Priority pickup, possible evidence of tampering. The ocean rolled on, indifferent, but the case had shifted again. Someone had engineered silence and counted on the sea to bury their work. Laura met Daniel Reed at a coffee shack facing the slips, steam curling from paper cups in the marine chill. He looked wrecked, eyes red, hands restless. He wouldn't risk a solo night dive, Daniel insisted, voice cracking. Laura watched him flinch when she mentioned the burned line. If that's true, someone wanted him stranded, she said. He stared at the water like it might answer. He told me he'd found a wreck off the point, Daniel admitted, finally. Older than charts say, he said there was proof on it. Laura's pen froze mid-stroke. Proof of what? Daniel shook his head. He never trusted phones. He said names had ears. The phrase lodged like shrapnel. Laura pushed. Who else knew? Silence widened. He breathed. Thomas Hale asked too many questions. The wind rattled the awning, and a gull shrieked like a siren no one responded to. The dive shop bell rang dull as brass when Laura stepped back inside. Thomas Hale stacked regulators with forced calm, jaw tight. "Back again," he said, trying for casual. Laura held his stare. "Why ask about a wreck off the point?" His hands paused, then resumed. "Folks gossip," he replied, eyes sliding away. She set a photo on the counter. The scorched line. "Someone cut his lifeline," she said. "Who was on the water last night?" Hale exhaled through his nose. "I close by 10, he said. "Check the fuel slips." Laura reached across, gently lifted his right sleeve. A faint rope burn arced his forearm. He pulled back too late. "Loading crates," he snapped. Her voice cooled. "Where to?" He hesitated, then muttered, "A charter called Night Heron." The name hit like iron. She filed it, thanked him, and left him staring at the door, sweat starting under fluorescent hum. Records lived in a cramped harbor office that smelled of diesel and paper. Laura paged through fuel logs while the clerk fidgeted. "Night Heron took on fuel at 23:12, she read. "Captain?" The clerk sighed. "Registered to Seabright Charters, corporate box address." She photographed the page, then traced slip assignments to a far corner. There the berth sat empty, ropes wet, cleats scuffed. A smear of soot marred the dock. Laura crouched, pocketing a fleck of black residue. Her phone buzzed, the lab confirming thermite trace on the cut line. "So they burned it fast and clean," she said. Wind shoved a gull across the sky, and in the gust she heard intention. Whoever ran the Night Heron understood tides, evidence, and fear. She looked back toward the town and felt its smallness. Big crimes like small places. They folded there, neat as charts. That evening, Laura assembled the threads on a whiteboard in her motel room, neon humming outside like an anxious heart. She pinned the diver's note, the Night Heron, the thermite, the rope burn, the wreck off the point. "Someone with money," she said, pacing. Margaret Cole called, voice shaking. "A man left a voicemail," she said. "He said to stop digging, or my son stays gone." Laura's spine straightened. "Play it," she said, listening to a filtered baritone promise ruin. She saved the audio and felt anger settle into focus. Daniel texted coordinates, an approximation of the wreck. Hale went dark, his shop closed early. The pattern clarified into a fist. Laura holstered, zipped her coat and looked at the map. "If proof lies beneath," she said, "I'm going to get it." Outside, the sea breathed in and out, patient as a hunter who already knew where she would be. Fog rolled off the breakwater before dawn as Detective Laura Hayes untied a borrowed skiff, her breath white in the cold. Daniel Reed climbed in, jaw clenched, guilt riding his shoulders. "We go straight to the pin," he said, pointing to the crude chart. Laura checked the sonar puck and the waterproof camera, then tightened her hood against the wind. "No heroics," she said, voice flat. The outboard muttered, and the town fell behind like a rumor. Swells rose slow, thick with kelp, and the GPS cursor crept over gray water that seemed to hold its breath. Daniel broke the hush. "If he found that wreck, there's proof in it." Laura watched the depth numbers climb, and felt the case narrow to a blade. "Or a motive," she answered. Far off, a dark hull ghosted without lights, then slipped behind fog as if ashamed to be seen. They drifted over the coordinate, engine cut, the skiff ticking in the swell. Laura dropped the camera rig and watched the tether pay out, pixels deepening from blue to black. A corroded hull emerged, ribs yawning like broken teeth. "There," Daniel whispered, leaning close. The lens tracked a cargo hold where a sealed crate lay silted, stenciled with a faded shipping mark. Laura filmed slow circles, heart punching at her ribs. "He didn't imagine it," she said. A low thrum vibrated the hull of their skiff, followed by a subtle tug on the tether. Daniel's eyes snapped wide. "They're on the line," he hissed. The feed jittered, snowed, then steadied. Laura gripped the spool. "Real now," she said, dragging cable hand over hand. The thrum faded, but the rig surfaced, clutching a splinter of cratewood and a flake of paint that felt heavier than steel. By noon, the dive shop sign read closed, but a side door cracked when Laura knocked. Thomas Hale stood in shadow, eyes rimmed, a rag twisting between his hands. "I'm done talking," he muttered. Laura set the splintered cratewood on the counter and a photo of the faded stencil. "You moved cargo from that wreck," she said. His throat worked. "I sold air, not ghosts." Steps clicked behind them. A woman entered, clutching a manila envelope like a life preserver. "My name is Priya Desai," she said. "I handle accounts for Seabright." Hale flinched. Priya's voice shook but held. "Invoices to shell companies, cash withdrawals, fuel chits for the Night Heron, all tied to offshore salvage." Laura stepped closer. "Why come now?" Priya swallowed. "Because the messages started. They know I saw." The envelope hit the counter with a sound that felt like a door opening. 2 hours later, the precinct conference room smelled like coffee and varnish when Chief Grant Lowell called Laura in. His tie was perfect and his patience thin. "Stand down," he said, tapping a memo stamped jurisdictional coordination. Laura kept her voice level. "Seabright is laundering salvage, tied to a missing diver." Lowell's smile didn't touch his eyes. "The Port Authority and donors are watching," he replied. "Release nothing without my office." The word donors landed like a weight on the table. Laura felt heat climb her neck and forced it down. "A witness is in danger," she said. He spread his hands. "Then keep her safe off the record and stop rattling cages." The meeting ended with a door click that sounded like a lock. In the hall, Laura texted Priya one word. "Move." Power protects itself, she thought, and sometimes it does it in daylight. Night draped the motel like a cheap suit when Laura keyed in and froze. Her whiteboard lay ripped down, photos scattered under boot tracks. The laptop's lid was closed but warm. She swept the room with her light and found a bent sprinkler head, a smeared glove print on the sill, and a faint chemical tang. "You're late," she said to the air, pulse steadying. She slid a doorstop under the knob, then triggered the fire alarm with a lighter. Water hammered down, washing footprints into shining maps. A neighbor shouted, and someone ran outside, heavy and hurried. Laura snapped a photo of a partial print before it bled away. The micro-recorder she'd left behind a lamp still blinked. She played it, and heard a whisper filtered low. "She has the ledger," the voice said. "Take the girl next time." Laura looked up, and the night looked back without blinking. Priya Desai sat in a borrowed office above a bait shop, hands tight around a paper cup as the harbor thumped below. Detective Laura Hayes spread ledgers, fuel slips, and shell company invoices across a scarred desk. Priya whispered, "Seabright used Coastal Heritage Fund to mask cash." Laura traced a column of withdrawals tied to the Night Heron. "Who signed authorizations?" she asked. Priya swallowed. Grant Lowell's donor circle, routed through a board member. The room shrank around the names. Laura said, "That makes Port Authority pressure more than politics." Priya slid a flash drive across. "There's a subcontract too, Reed Marine Services." Laura's pen stopped mid-note. Daniel Reed's business stared back, tidy and damning. Below them, a trawler horn moaned like a warning. Laura closed the folder. "If this holds, someone bought silence with tide and steel," she said. Priya nodded. "And they are not done buying." Laura found Daniel Reed on the marina ramp, sun a cold coin over still water. She held up the ledger copy. "Reed Marine took Seabright money," she said. Daniel flinched, then set his jaw. "I fixed engines, hauled rope," he muttered. "Cash is cash." Laura stepped closer. Thermite on the cut line came from a Port Authority stash. Your fuel card hits match night Heron runs. He stared at the slick words, backing away from his tongue. I didn't touch his air, he said, voice small. Laura's eyes stayed flat. But you knew someone would. He shook, anger curdling into fear. They said it was clean salvage, he insisted. They said he'd be fine. Wind rattled halyards like bones. Laura pocketed the copy. If you're a witness, say so. If you're a partner, pray you're first to flip, she said. Daniel looked past her, as if help might rise from the tide. At dusk, Laura staged a meet at the cannery inlet, Priya wired and pale but steady. We trade nothing, Laura said, checking the recorder. We listen. Thomas Hale idled a work skiff nearby, eyes on the tide line. I'm not proud, he said, but I won't see another man drown. Sodium lamps hummed as a dark hull slid from shadow. Men in rain slickers stepped onto the dock, faces hidden by brims. Envelope, one said, voice filtered and wrong. Priya held her ground. Laura watched the end of the pier, waiting for backup that never came. Her phone pulsed with a text from Chief Lowell. Stand down. She pocketed it without reply. The leader's glove twitched, and the dock creaked under a choice. Laura's thumb found the safety on her holster. Somewhere beyond, a buoy bell rang once, and the scene tightened like a knot. The Night Heron's crew surged and grabbed for Priya. Laura moved first, the dock exploding into shouts and boots. Hale slammed his skiff against the pilings, knocking one man sideways. Laura drove the leader back and saw beyond his shoulder an open hold with a steel chamber lashed inside. Frost clung to its gauge like old breath. Hyperbaric, she said, the word of fist. The leader hissed, too late. Sirens wailed, then cut like someone yanked a cord. Laura pivoted Priya behind a piling and snapped 2 photos, chamber and hull number. A gloved hand caught her shoulder. You're trespassing, the baritone growled. The same filter as the voicemail. She shoved free as Hale swung an oar, and the men retreated into wake and fog. Laura stared at the chamber and felt the story turn under her boots. Someone had kept a diver breathing not to save him, but to own him. Back at the bait shop office, Laura dried her phone on a heater and pulled the photos onto a laptop. The hull number traced to a Seabright shell. The chamber serial matched a Port Authority purchase order signed 5 years prior. An audio tech compared the filtered baritone to a press clip. Probability matched to Chief Grant Lowell. The email read. Priya opened the flash drive and a video bloomed. The missing diver, Ryan Cole, helmet cam slicing through green water toward a rotten barge. Barrels rolled in silt, stenciled with hazard marks and a seal from the authority. Ryan's voice shook, their dumping contract waste into tide. A second voice bled in from topside, amused and close to a mic. Make your choice, son. Laura paused on the waveform and felt the twist lock into place. Ryan wasn't lost by accident. He had found the truth, and power had caged him to keep it from surfacing. Rain braided the harbor lights as Detective Laura Hayes parked behind the cannery and killed her engine. Priya Desai waited in the shadow of a forklift, clutching a backpack of copies and the flash drive. He signed the purchase, Priya said, voice tight, and moved waste at night. Laura nodded, eyes on the pier where the Night Heron idled without running lights. Thomas Hale eased from a side door, face pinched. Crew's loading the chamber, he murmured. If they sail, he's gone. Laura inhaled salt and oil and fear, then steadied it. We split, she said. Priya to the radio shack, Thomas with me. Thunder rolled low, like a threat clearing its throat. Laura texted the coordinates to a federal contact and slid her badge inside her coat. Chief Lowell will try to bury this, she said. The wind shoved the door, and the night seemed to lean closer to listen. In the radio shack, Priya's fingers danced over dusty switches until the coast channel crackled awake. USCG, this is civilian reporting illegal hazardous salvage, she said, voice steady by force. A knock rattled the thin door. Chief Grant Lowell stepped in from the rain, suit immaculate under a dark slicker, smile carved from ice. "You're off this," he said, and reached for the board. Priya blocked his hand. "Public safety," she answered. He leaned close, whisper filtered to menace. "Turn it off and go home." Outside, Laura and Hale crossed catwalks toward the Night Heron's stern. Priya met Lowell's gaze and hit transmit. "Chief involved," she said, clear as a bell. He froze a heartbeat, then lunged for the power. Lights flickered as generators kicked and horns erupted across the harbor like startled geese. Laura swung onto the Night Heron's deck as Hale bumped his skiff against the hull, fiberglass shrieking. Two crewmen turned, faces hidden by masks, hands already moving to draw. "Stop," Laura barked, sightline steady, "hands where I see them." One rushed anyway and met the rail hard when Hale swept his legs. Laura moved past, eyes on the open hold where the hyperbaric chamber gleamed with frost. Faint tapping came from inside, thin as a moth against glass. "Ryan," she called, throat tight. The gauge needle trembled in a red band, starving the mix. A masked foreman stepped from shadow, voice a baritone bruise. "I walk away." Laura kept him in her sights and hit her radio. "Federal response en route," she said. "Cut power and open it." He smiled under rubber. "No witnesses," he answered, and his hand dipped for a valve like a guillotine. Sirens wailed distant, and then nearer as Priya's broadcast seeded across channels. Lowell stormed from the shack, barking into his phone, but the harbor answered with moving lights he could not command. On the deck, Laura lunged, slamming the foreman's wrist against steel. The valve clanged harmlessly past its stop. "Keys," she snapped. He hissed and swung. She took the hit on her shoulder, pain ringing bright. Hale shoved a pry bar into the chamber latch. "Pressure equalize," Laura said, breath measured. The gauge crept towards safe as the cutter's horn blew long and ugly. Lowell appeared on the dock, voice rising to a threat that sounded like a plea. "Stand down, Hayes." She didn't. The latch gave, and cold air washed her face. Inside, Ryan Cole blinked through condensation, pale and alive, and trying to speak through a mouth that had held more fear than air. Ryan sagged into Laura's arms, breath ragged, lips blue but words forming. "Barrels," he gasped. "Authority seal. Lowell on the radio." She wrapped him in a thermal blanket and met Priya on the gangway, both women steady as tide. The cutter bumped fenders and uniformed boards, took the crew to steel and silence. Lowell tried to step back into darkness, but the Coast Guard XO took his elbow like a signature. Laura raised her phone and played the baritone clip. The dock went very still. "You endangered a civilian to protect illegal dumping," she said. He managed a smile that failed to land. "You'll sink the town." Laura looked beyond him to water that would keep its dead, unless asked gently. "The town can swim," she said. Cameras whirred, evidence walked, and dawn began to pry the storm apart. For the first time, the sea felt less like a mouth, and more like a witness. The hospital's hyperbaric ward hummed like a distant tide as morning glazed the windows with pale gold. Ryan Cole lay inside a clear chamber, color returning in cautious shades. Detective Laura Hayes stood beside Priya Desai and Thomas Hale, their reflections ghosted on the acrylic. Ryan blinked and lifted two fingers, and relief shook the room loose. Margaret Cole arrived with a whispering prayer and pressed her palm to the glass. "My boy," she said, the words fragile and fierce. Laura briefed the doctor, then leaned close. "You're safe," she said, "but we need your voice when you can give it." Ryan swallowed hard. "Lowell," he rasped, "and barrels with the seal." Daniel Reed hovered in the doorway, guilt heavy as ballast. "I'll testify," he said, not to Laura but to the floor. Laura nodded once. "Then we finish what the water tried to keep," she said, and the hum answered like a vow. By noon the harbor wore hard hats and caution tape as cranes groaned over gray swells. Coast Guard divers marked the wreck, while federal agents boxed documents at Seabright. Laura stood on a platform with Priya, watching barrels rise like sins surfacing for air. "Chain of custody is clean," Priya said, checking forms with shaking hands. Laura scanned the pier where reporters shouted into wind. "Truth is louder," she said, though her voice kept its blade. Thomas Hale signed a statement and met Margaret's gaze without flinching. "I'm sorry," he said, simple as a tide chart. Daniel hauled a sample crate and handed it to an agent, jaw set against shame. "No more quiet jobs," he said. A gull wheeled and cried like a siren fading. Laura looked at the water and thought of the quiet places where power hides. "Not today," she said, and the cranes kept lifting. The interrogation room held Chief Grant Lowell like a photograph pinned by 4 tacks. His cuffs flashed dull as tin when he shifted. "Ah." Laura placed a recorder between them and pressed play. The filtered baritone spilled out, then folded back into his unmasked cadence. "Probability matches not certainty," he said, smile brittle. Priya sat behind glass, headphones on, logging timecodes. "You purchased the chamber," Laura said, sliding a copy of the order. He shrugged at the paper as if it were weather. Daniel entered with counsel and set a statement down, voice low. "He ordered the runs," he said. Lowell's eyes ticked, then steadied. "You'll drown this town in lawsuits," he said. Laura leaned in until only truth fit between them. "You buried it in poison first," she said. Silence sat, heavy and exact, and the recorder turned that weight into evidence. A week later, the town gathered at the pier for words that tasted of salt and relief. Ryan stood on crutches, pale but upright, while Margaret held his elbow like a promise kept. Laura spoke without ceremony. "We clean what was hidden," she said, "and we watched the water together." Priya read the names of crew who chose to testify, and the wind carried each one like a bell toll. Thomas Hale stepped forward and offered the dive shop ledger to the community fund. "I owed the harbor more than apologies," he said. Daniel set a reef marker beside the rail and bowed his head. "For those who didn't rise," he said. Boats answered with short horns, low and grateful. Laura felt the crowd lean toward a future that sounded like work, not headlines. The sea rolled, no longer indifferent, only wide. Night returned soft and salt-sweet as Laura walked the breakwater alone, case file sealed under her arm. The lamps threw coins of light that rocked in the tide like steady breaths. She stopped where the wetsuit had once dripped and listened to the harbor count seconds. Her phone buzzed with a message from Priya. "EPA truck scheduled, cleanup begins at dawn." Ryan texted a single word after it, "Breathing." Laura smiled, small and unguarded. She touched the railing, metal cooled by wind and rain and restitution. "Secrets sink," she said to the dark, "but truth floats if you keep lifting." The waves answered with a hush that felt like assent. She turned for shore, steps slow and sure, and the final image held on water stilled to ink, before the sound of a door locking on a cell cut clean through the night.